session. We're going to go over Achilles injuries in the NBA. I feel like I'm kind of a expert on this given my ankle situation currently. I want you guys to leave a comment and say slightly, your ankle's looking so good and so strong. Thank you very much. Look, Tyrese Halliburton's injury is one of the most devastating ones I can ever remember. Game 7, that early in the game, he's hit 3 deep threes, tears his Achilles. It will forever be known. This Game 7 will be forever remembered that way. It just sucks because as basketball fans, we had yearned for Game 7. It had been 9 years since we had seen a NBA Finals go 7 games. We have been long anticipating another one of these, and history tells us that Game 7s are incredible. Of the Game 7s in the history of the league, all of them, up until last night in the NBA Finals, had been decided by 5 or less points. So history told us we were due a great game. I think how the series had progressed tells us we were due a great game. Then Tyrese Halliburton tears his Achilles, and who the fuck knows what would have happened? Maybe the Thunder won by 20 anyways, right? But we'll never know. And it's led to this discussion because, Achilles injuries, it just doesn't feel like they'd ever been this frequent. And, I'm old enough to remember a time. Now, hold off on the fucking jokes. I'm old enough to remember a time where Achilles injuries were like a massive deal because they were kind of rare. And when a guy got one, it was like, oh, man. Like, it was like almost career-altering, career-ending in a way. Like, you were never going to come back the same. Times have changed. Sports medicine, thankfully, has gotten much better. So these guys can come back. And, look at Kevin Durant. He played some of the best basketball of his career in Brooklyn following his Achilles tear. So these guys can come back and perform at very high levels. But it does feel like the frequency of these Achilles injuries have ticked up dramatically. And we've had 3 this postseason to 3 stars. And, Dame's older, right? Dame's an old man. And, older guys tearing their Achilles. It happens. It sucks. But Tatum is 27 years old, 28 years old. Halliburton's 23. Like, these guys are not supposed to be tearing their Achilles. And it does kind of lead to these questions of what is something going on? Is there it's just kind of freak accidents and freak injuries, and they just happen so frequently that it's in quick succession that we're like, something's got to be going up. Or is there something going on? Is there something going on with the fact that everyone who tore their Achilles in the playoffs this year is wearing number 0? Is that not a little weird? Is that not a little bit strange, actually? Everybody who tore their Achilles this postseason is number 0. That's a little fucking freaky. The NBA playoffs have just been devil magic central, okay? But I saw this Twitter thread, and I thought this could be an interesting rambling topic, an interesting yapping topic. Playing 82 games less. So this is from Myth Knicks. It's kind of like this data over mythology. MJ and LeBron are both undefeated in the finals when favored in over 27. Wait, who is this? I haven't read this thread yet. What am I about to get into? MJ beat losers. All right. LeBron beat winners. MJ beat losers. Okay. All right. I respect it. Let's get into it. I didn't know exactly what I was getting into, but let's get into it. So here's this guy's theory. This LeBron Sands theory on what exactly is going on. Playing 82 games less often. Today's NBA is harder on NBA players. So this is something immediately I agree with, because old heads immediately it was more physical. Lambeer would punch you in the mouth the moment you step foot in the paint, right? But the reality is the NBA today is quicker. There's better athletes. It's more athletic. It's more explosive. And that is typically harder on your lower body, right? This is an interesting stat right here. Average miles covered per 82 games. You see this uptick. Like, players are moving around the court more. The floor is more spaced. Defensively, you have to do more. You have to work harder to close out, to rotate. And just the nature of teams are playing with quicker pace. Like, this floor-spaced game leads to you moving around the floor more. Old heads complain that players today are weak and not as tough as the 80s, 90s guys because they don't play 82 games as much, except it's physically hard to play in the NBA today. Yeah, 80s and 90s, old heads that complain about this shit are annoying, and you should never fucking take them seriously. That's just the reality of the situation, and I hate to say it. First, players are using a higher percentage of their athleticism today. P3, a sports science group that worked with NBA and MLB teams, says that players are using 90% of their athleticism today versus 70 only 15 years ago. So that's, this is a lesson, guys, because, again, I feel like I am kind of an expert in this field because of my ankle injury, obviously. When I got injured, it was just putting 100% effort out on a defensive play, right? Kind of known at my LA Fitness as this sort of gym rat, lunch pail guy, first guy in, last guy out, hardworking, defensive-oriented player. And I got injured on a defensive play going for a steal, smacked into a guy, landed on my ankle, bad fractured my ankle, tore some ligaments, got surgery. They said my ankle will be better than it's ever been, ever. So on that front, I understand, right? When you're putting forth more effort, you're going to get injured easier. And, now I'm going to go back. I'm going to revert back to 30s when I play. I'm only going to do 70%, maybe even less than that. I'm not going to try on defense anymore. So I kind of understand. To measure how those slightly smaller bodies move, some NBA teams turn to a company called P3. More than 2/3 of the players who are on pro rosters when the season tipped off earlier this week have worked out at a P3 facility, according to the company. Players are outfitted head to toe with more than 20 sensors. They are asked to perform intense vertical and lateral movements atop special sensor-laden platforms. Their every twitch is recorded. So I guess my question is, 15 years ago, when Elliott first started evaluating players about 15 years ago, many were operating at only 75 to 80% of their potential athleticism. Okay. They weren't as ballistic as today's players. Ballistic is a sick way to describe an athlete. Ooh, I'm going to start using that. But they could still get by on skills. Most of today's players, by contrast, are more than 90% optimized by their first visit to P3. So P3 is ruining. At P3, your performance defines our purpose. Our team of dedicated sports scientists and engineers assumes your potential has not been reached. So this P3 company is killing our players. So that's my big takeaway. P3 is killing our basketball players. All right, lock them up. Lock them up, please. Thank you. We found the culprit. The higher percentage of athleticism is also coming from better athletes. Player agility, speed, and jumping ability has increased, particularly for guards. Here's the improvement in draft combine data comparing 2001 averages by position to 2025. All right, so you just look at the agility numbers, sprint, standing vertical, max vertical. 2025 versus 2021 combine, improvement. So this is just an improvement on the average. You see max vertical's gone up 16% for centers. Holy shit. That tracks. You get these kind of like freak athletes, right? These freak athletes at the center position. And I wonder how much of that, though, I do have to ask, how much of that is a change of philosophy from 2001 to 2025, where maybe in 2001, you were kind of ignoring these very raw athletic centers in favor of these more lumbering, more established bigs who had slow footwork, but grabbed, 15 rebounds a game for Illinois the year before in college. Like this kind of, who was like a post technician, had a great drop step for, Georgetown in 2003. Like, how much of that is that versus now in 2025, teams aren't even looking at those dudes and are more going for the, what's the dude's name? The French dude in this year's draft. Fuck, what's his name? I just watched his shit last night. Not Traore, that's the point guard. The big, Berenger, however you say his name. John Berenger. Who's this raw athlete who you watch him play sometimes. It's like, this guy just started playing basketball 3 years ago. And then it comes like, he did just start playing basketball 3 years ago. Like, teams are now looking at that. That guy might go in the lottery. That probably would not have happened in 2001. So I don't know how much of that is that. I wonder. That's a question I do have. But you just see across the board, though. Like, yes, the NBA has better athletes now than it did 20 years ago. That's not that big of a surprise, right? But I think that does lead to more injuries because your bodies aren't built to be as athletic as some of these guys are. Like, that's just the truth, which is why LeBron's durability is one of the most insane things ever, really. This peak athleticism combined with increased shooting skill is influencing the style of play, bringing more deacceleration. Okay, I was wondering if he was going to get here because this was something I was thinking about as well, is that this deacceleration has become more important in today's game than it probably ever has, right? In that quick stopping and then starting again, that's when you can really get to some scary injury stuff. Deacceleration on defense caused a lot more wear and tear on the body over 82 games. Older fans don't understand this. So hard for human bodies. Perhaps the increase in, this is from an Atlantic article, perhaps the increase in injuries is instead of function of the pro game's new physical demands. In 2018, researchers measured the movements of professional basketball players in Barcelona in a game setting and found that among the 1,000 or so actions that players perform during a game, some are especially hard on the body. Jumps were obviously intense, as even casual hoopers can tell you. Rough landings lead to ankle sprains. This is all just triggering a whole lot of stuff for me. I got to be honest with you. Can you guys leave a like and a comment and a subscription for support for how difficult this is on me right now to read this and give you guys this content, even though this is still so raw and emotional for me in so many different ways? So were accelerations, all-out sprints, and deaccelerations. According to Elliott, the latter are most likely to give players traumatic injuries and wear and tear, especially when a player has to deaccelerate on short notice. If Luka Doncic is coming at you really hard and then he steps back, you have to try and deaccelerate out of nowhere and then accelerate in some other direction. To close out, Elliott said, those transitions are so hard for human bodies, especially if an athlete already has a strain or some asymmetry that causes him to favor one leg over the other. Important in Halliburton's case, although Halliburton's was a drop step, a little negative step that caused that. The spacing of today's game and the sheer ubiquity of good shooters requires players to consistently accelerate and deaccelerate on defense, and doing so across an 82-game season, maybe bringing them within range of the human body's limits. Yeah, so it does go back to, again, something I said earlier, with the way the floor is spaced now, defense is so much harder. This is why, this talk about defense, nobody plays defense anymore. It is absolutely fucking ridiculous. And it just sounds insane to anyone who watches basketball regularly, right? Who watches the NBA regularly. Because you watch them play, and defenses are more complex than they've ever been. Defenses, they got to fly around the court. They got to cover so much ground now because of how many good shooters are on the floor, how spaced the floor is, how skilled players are now. Because it's not just, hey, I'm a catch and shoot guy who stands in the corner and I don't really do much else. I'm a catch and shoot guy who stands in the corner and I can attack a shifted defense as well. I can attack a closeout. So now you got to fly around the court at every given moment. So it's just harder on the body. It's all changed so much that old heads aren't even able to identify elite athletes any longer. Luka Doncic is considered unathletic, yet he has elite breaks, upper 10% of NBA athletes. That's what allows him to dominate. Same with Harden. Deacceleration isn't understood. Yeah, so this is an article that says Luka rated better than 90% of the hundreds of NBA players who have tested at the facility in terms of his deacceleration. That's why Luka's got that slow step and stuff. That's why he's an impossible guard. Impossible guard. Players today also have to run a lot further than they used to. Some of this is pace, but it's also the more open play, more sets run, and less standing around while somebody dribbles out the clock in the post. Yeah, I mean, this is what we talked about earlier. All of this is stacked on top of players who have played hundreds of additional games as teenagers. This is also a key point right here. They come into the NBA already worn down, ticking time bombs. Specializing in a sport 8 months a year increases injury risk by 125%. Wait, there's actually been studies on this? This is interesting. Let's read through some of these articles. Through dozens of interviews over the past 2 years with NBA team and league officials, current and former players, AAU coaches, parents, youth players, researchers, medical and athletic training officials, and around the NBA, as well as those immediately involved with youth basketball, one possible answer repeatedly emerged. Players, they say, are physically broken down by the time they reach the NBA. It's difficult to tally how many hours of basketball today's athlete might play before he reaches the NBA, but consider that a parent could sign their child up for organized youth basketball as young as 7 years old and continue on that path all the way through high school. How many games might that equate to? If you've ever played, I mean, you don't even need to be in the EYBL, right? If you've ever played basketball at any level young, you know you're playing like 3 games a day in tournaments at times. You know how fucking crazy that is? You're waking up at 8 a.m. playing 3-4 games, and you might do the same thing the next day. Officials from one of the most prestigious teams on the Nike EYBL circuit estimates that someone who played consistently between 7 and 19 over a span of 13 years could easily play more than 1,000 organized games, which doesn't include club team practices or pickup games or workouts with trainers. Or to put it another way, enough games to encompass more than 12 NBA seasons. Damn. Yeah. And again, I like that it factored in there, training, team practices where you're scrimmaging, pickup games where, you'll play in pickup games that are serious, You play in pickup games, especially if it's against friends or, teammates, whatever the case may be, like you're playing that shit hard. Their conclusion, those who are highly specialized in one sport at the exclusion of other sports and played it year-round were at significantly higher risk for serious overuse injuries, such as bone and cartilage injuries and ligament injuries. How much of a high risk? About 125%. God damn. That figure would establish one of the first strong and independent links between injuries and sports specialization. It would spark headlines, and that issue would become among the highest priorities for 2 leading sports medicine organizations, the American Medical Society for Sports Medicine, which held a research summit on this topic with leaders from around the country, and the American Orthopedic Society for Sports Medicine. They need to talk to me. A separate 2016 study from Bell and his team found that 36% of high school athletes classified as highly specialized, training in one sport for more than 8 months a year. Those athletes were 2 or 3 times more likely to suffer a hip or knee injury. Wow, 36% is a little bit shocking to me. I'd actually think that was more, to be honest with you. So this is something, and someone said this in the chat, and it's true. This is something that spans multiple sports. Like baseball has an epidemic right now. I don't know if you guys follow that or are aware of that at all. Baseball has a elbow injury epidemic currently. It's bad. Like if you're a pitcher making the MLB, it's like a foregone conclusion that you're going to have at least one serious elbow surgery at some point in your career. At least one. Like it's almost like a rite of passage in the NBA currently, or in the MLB, and it's because of this as well, where it's these kids are pitching, 100, 130, 150 innings a year for, even probably more than that. Like they play year-round baseball. I mean, I did it growing up. I played travel select baseball going up. You play year-round. Like you're pitching in tournaments in the summer, then you're playing for your high school team. You're throwing bullpens, you're pitching on the weekends, you're pitching games. Then you go play for your summer travel ball team, and then you play in the fall. You go to these scouting, camps or whatever the fuck they call them. I'm blanking on the word. And you pitch every weekend in those. Like, and in some instances, I knew I had friends who would go to a camp on a Saturday and then a camp on a Sunday, and they're pitching 50, 60, 70 pitches both days. And the amount of pitches you're throwing over the course of a year is just insane. And it's leading to these elbow injuries, which speaks to these kids are specializing in these sports, and they're not giving their body any time to rest whatsoever. Because every sport maximizes different parts of your body more, right? That's just it. Note also that players in the past also didn't work as hard as today's players. All right, this kind of feels like it might be a little... This guy is shitting on some old heads a little bit. This feels like it might be a little... Here's McHale, I'm assuming Kevin McHale, saying he didn't work on his body. Bird saying they're out of shape playing college kids in the summer. MJ saying he doesn't work out. The Lakers not playing in the summer. I mean... I don't know. I would say weight training and stuff has definitely advanced. And these guys probably work on their body more. These guys probably work on their body more today than they do back then. I don't know if that's like a, hey, let's shit on old guys, they didn't try hard. Or if it's more so again, the sports science and stuff says, hey, after games, we need to be doing these workouts to maximize your body. Let's take MJ as an example. The Bulls director of performance health from 1993 to 2000 says MJ myths aren't true. MJ played golf in the offseason, not basketball. Didn't pick up a basketball in the summer. He took practices off. MJ wasn't tougher. He was resting more. I mean, okay. All right. Like, I agree with you. The saying that today's players don't practice as much as old players is probably fucking nonsensical. Finally, there were steroids in the 90s. Now we're talking. The number of 82 game seasons played in the NBA varies directly with high school steroid usage. And you see drops as testing got tighter. Wait, what is the correlation here? The number of 82 game seasons played in the NBA varies directly with high school steroid usage. Okay. I mean, that's interesting. That is interesting. That is kind of interesting. I don't know. When steroids... I'm not an expert here, even though I do take them. When steroids have a negative effect on your body? So all of this makes it harder today. More running and deacceleration, peak athleticism, tighter steroid rules. So bring back steroids. All right, I'm in. More effort to develop skills. Players aren't any less tough. In fact, they work harder and play harder. Increased skill just came with an increased physical toll. Mm-mm. Although I love when Myth Nix wastes his life doing these threads when everyone knows he's a LeBron lackey with no job or social life. I don't know the Myth Nix lore, so maybe there's a little bit more to the story. But an interesting thread nonetheless with like research and data to back it up. You know, it is interesting. Like, how do you fix this, though? I guess would be my question. How do you fix the fact that these kids are specializing in sports and playing hundreds of games a year? I don't know what the fix is, to be honest with you. Like, do you put rules in effect that say, hey, if you play for your high school team, you can only play in these certain summer leagues that have a strict limit on how many games and practices are allowed? Is that the fix? But you'd have to try and do some type of worldwide thing, because if it's like, yeah, but they're not doing that in France. Yeah, China saw that and they're like, all right, here's our chance. Like, we're doing 20 hour a day basketball labs to get our kids ready to go play in the NBA because American kids aren't training as hard anymore. Like, is that the fix? I mean, I don't know. This might just be our reality currently. I don't know. Do we shorten the NBA season? That would help. I'm certain that would help. Just less miles on these guys' bodies. But I don't know how that accounts for the fact that by all the research, these guys are entering the NBA already broken down. These guys are entering the NBA with already years upon years, decades of wear and tear on their body. How do you fix that? I think that's the biggest epidemic. Honestly, I think beyond the NBA season being 82 games long, like the NBA season being 82 games long is just a symptom of a bigger problem, which is, I absolutely think youth sports. I think youth sports is the biggest problem. 100%. Through and through. There's always going to be injuries, right? There will always be injuries no matter what. It's a contact sport. You know, I think out of all sports, it requires you to use the most athleticism imaginable. I mean, anytime you say something like that, football fans are like, no, football fans, you have like, depending on your position, you have like 5 set movements, okay? So there's a reason why it's like, yeah, this rugby player didn't even know what the NFL was, but now he's the best lineman in the NFL. Yeah, because there's not a lot of, like, you just go out there and do shit. I'm ready. It's getting close to that time of the year where we're going to start hating on the NFL again. You just go out there and, yeah, just move around a little tiny bit. NBA requires, I don't know what the fix is, man. I just don't. NBA players already don't practice, but they do practice though. Like, yeah, they've cut down the practice time, but I mean, isn't it probably a good thing they don't practice like hard? Take calf injuries appropriately. So the Tatum one and the Dame one, like, yeah, Halliburton was playing with fire. We know that. There's been articles and stuff that say that calf injuries do not lead to Achilles injuries. Shams nuke, is it actual Shams bomb? Okay, hold on. This was a ramble sesh. I don't know. Fix youth sports. I gotta go.